This is Brevard Watch, the news experience focused exclusively on Florida's Space Coast. I'm Matt Reed. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring today's program. My guest is Caroline Glenn, the reporter from Florida Today who covers Brevard Public Schools, but also has done some interesting general assignments in the past several months, and we'll get to that today. Caroline, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you have been busy lately. There's been a lot of news out of the school district. Biggest stories recently have had to do with teacher pay raises, but also other budget priorities that you did a pretty good job of summing up for your readers. Teachers not happy that there were some other priorities, but some of them were things they actually want to. How do you size up what just happened?
I mean, it definitely is this big conflict, and I feel like, my whole job is to see both sides of the story, but I really feel like I do see both sides of the story where I understand teachers are underpaid. As a journalist, I understand being underpaid, and they want more money. But I've talked to Dr. Blackburn and I've talked to the other assistant superintendents about this list of, I think it was 16 new projects, about $14 million total. And that's from all different pots and doesn't all just go straight to teacher raises. But these are projects that are going to be for well-rounded projects. You've got a suicide prevention program, you've got bringing back corridor busing, hiring social workers, reopening South Lake. I've been to the town halls that the school district hosts, and I have heard people talk about some of these specific things. They want more choice options. Busing has been a problem. They hear about the suicides that are happening in the nation and also locally. So I do see both sides that we need these programs, but Dr. Blackburn, I was just with him last night at an event, and he continues to recognize that nationally, teachers do need to be paid more, and they need to be valued more. I've heard him say 1,000 times that when teachers and journalists, got into this business, we knew we were going to be underpaid. We, as he puts it, we never expected to own a private jet. But what people don't expect is being undervalued, being treated like second-class citizens. And I think that that's what the teachers are feeling right now, up to the public to decide if it's rightfully so. But they've said that they feel like the school board now and the superintendent now, they're starting to feel like the old administration where, just giving them the scraps or, blaming it on Tallahassee for what you can't give them. But Dr. Blackburn keeps saying that they're pro-teacher, they're pro-employee. So we have come to an end where they've agreed. The teachers still need to vote on it. So, and I'm terrible at making predictions, so we'll see if they actually pass what they agreed on.
It's really pretty remarkable how much, in terms of pay and how things work, how teaching or education and journalism have in common. At just about every rung of the career, the pay scale is just about the same. Mm-hmm. A reporter makes about as much as a teacher. An assistant principal and an assistant city editor kind of make about the same. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I found most interesting is that these are two occupations that if you didn't have some limit on the hours or you'd work around the clock.
Right.
My first year as a news reporter at the Brighton Standard-Blade was the last year that reporters were not hourly workers.
Okay.
And I had a publisher who, after a full week of reporting the news, laying out the paper, had us come in and hang drywall and remodel the offices on the weekend. And it was so I got a little light carpentry in with my first year of journalism experience, and then they said, no, you got to pay people overtime. Teachers, a little bit of a different thing, decided kind of late in the bargaining process to try to do something called teaching to the contract. Mm-hmm. What did that mean, and how far do you think that went?
Well, yeah, so it's something that we've seen at a couple districts throughout the country in recent years. Most recently was Hillsborough County. I believe they're still doing it because I don't think they came to an agreement yet. But it's when the teachers union encourages other teachers to only work what's in your contract. So a lot of people don't know that teachers actually have a contract. It says how many hours you have to work, what duties you have to perform. Well, things like grading papers at home, staying late, coming in early, those things aren't in there, but most people know that, most teachers do that. They just always seem to be there. A lot of kids think that teachers just sleep under their desk or something. So the teachers union recently was encouraging teachers only do what's in the contract, which, I guess you could call the bare minimum or the, what have you. But there definitely were some teachers that did it. there definitely were some teachers who didn't do it, either just because they didn't think they could or they didn't want to. But they said it was to send a message to the school board and to the superintendent of, look how hard we are working. We need to be compensated fairly for it. It wasn't, as I've been told, it wasn't to say, you know, we only want to work the bare minimum. You know, kind of like what I was saying, teachers got into this knowing, you know, what job do you not go beyond your
Elementary school
hours?
teachers spend a lot of time in their classrooms making sure that things are all set to go. Secondary teachers who teach history or English take home hours of grading on weekends and at nights.
If you're an English teacher and you have essays for, you know, 120 students, that's going to take forever to grade. A lot of teachers, this was something else that they tried to avoid doing, buy a lot of their own classroom supplies, school supplies. I've written about that before. Sometimes teachers spend thousands of dollars decorating their classrooms, buying school supplies if they have at-risk students. So the point of this kind of campaign or protest, whatever you want to call it, was to send a message to the school board and the superintendent of, we deserve more. And you know, but I saw a lot of different responses from the community. Some people were really behind them, like, yeah, you know, teachers work so hard, they need more money. And some people were like, you know, what job doesn't require going beyond your normal hours? Or, you know, you see a lot of stuff from the community that's very, very mixed. It's definitely a mixed bag. I've asked the union if they think it was effective. They do think it was effective. They didn't have to do it for very long, actually. Well, I guess they could still be doing it, but it was only about 2 weeks until they came to this agreement with the school board.
Yeah, modest 1.5% raise, $200 bonus.
Yep.
Not what they wanted, not a lot of latitude to move, especially with some other priorities. And one of those priorities I know that you have looked into and have done some enterprise reporting on, and that has to do with suicide and student and prevention. What have you found on that issue here in Brevard County?
Yes, that's a project that I've been working on for a long time. Hopefully it will be done soon. So basically what I have seen, what I've been told is, you know, it's funny, when I talk to people about this problem, the first thing they want to say is, were they all doing drugs? Or were they all struggling with identifying their sexuality? You know, different things. And the answer is kind of no, that a lot of these kids were normal, happy, you know, on the outside, normal, happy kids. They got good grades. They were in clubs. They had friends. They had girlfriends and boyfriends. They were going to go to college. So that's kind of the main theme that I've found. And I think that really throws people for a loop. You know, when you're talking about suicide, the first thing people want to find out is why. And, you know, unless someone leaves behind a letter or something really specific, you never know why. You can go and look at different clues and maybe that's why, but you never know. And I think that these kids all being successful, looking happy on the outside really confuses people. And I know that I've talked with Beth Eddy from the district, Maggie Bellato before she left with psychological services, and it really did kind of throw things for a loop, because if you already have safeguards in place and then the kids are kind of flying under the radar, it's very hard to prevent a kid from committing suicide when you didn't even know they were struggling. You know, so I think that Dr. Blackburn has talked about that it's something deeper, though. You can't just train people what the signs are. It takes caring. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I know much better if my friend is struggling than a stranger. It takes teachers and counselors and staff and also, you know, students really paying attention to people and knowing people and building relationships so that when something is a little off, you actually recognize it and maybe that person is comfortable opening up with you. So it's a mountain of a problem. There's been a lot of them recently. It's been quiet for a while, and I know that it's kind of that feeling of holding your breath until is another one going to happen, is another one going to happen. And there are so many resources in Brevard County and at the school district. And 211 you can always dial if you're feeling like you're struggling. But it's a big issue, and hopefully I will have a project out about it very soon.
Well, we look forward to the full report. When we come back, meet Brevard County's Teacher of the Year for 2018.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
We'll have more with Florida Today's Caroline Glenn in just a minute, but first, here's a look at Brevard Public Schools Teacher of the Year for 2018. Director of Bands Brandon Jenkins has been at Heritage High in Palm Bay during his 5 years with Brevard Public Schools. Since Jenkins assumed leadership of the band program, it has more than quadrupled in size with approximately 130 current members and has seen an increase in assessment scores from poor and fair to superior. He has created multiple instrumental ensembles at the school and uses technology daily to aid in teaching and enhancing the classroom experience. Dr. John Harris, the principal at Heritage High, said, "I can count on Mr. Jenkins to arrive at school ready to impart his love for music to eager students. He has developed our Heritage High School band program into a superior rated concert band for the past 3 years." All right, now Caroline, let's talk about a couple of the other assignments that you've gotten this year that were not school related, but interesting nonetheless. Las Vegas shooting, which was shocking. Stephen Paddock killed 58 people, wounded and crippled 800 others, in the deadliest shooting in U.S. history. New report says, out this week, says he was a high-stakes gambler on a losing streak, possibly bipolar, and was having difficulties with his live-in girlfriend. In the immediate aftermath of this shooting, you got an assignment for the USA Today network. What was it?
Yes, they sent me to his brother's house in Orlando. His brother, Eric Paddock, lives not too far from the University of Central Florida. And it was literally, the day after everything happened, and I pulled up, and his house is swarmed with media. Every TV station, even AP, the Washington Post, everyone was there. And
feeding frenzy.
Yeah, and you can make a judgment call about how you feel about all that. I have my own internal struggles, but it was basically my job and everyone else's job to sit there until he decides to come out and say something. Some of us would go up and knock on the door and say, this kind of happened, obviously. Do you want to say anything? And he actually was very open with talking to the media. He would come out for like half hour at a time and just take all of our questions, answer anything we wanted to know.
Probably stunned himself.
He was stunned, and you could almost see the wheels turning in his head he was trying to piece this together. I mean, even with something so awful that his brother did, imagine, that's your brother still. That's a piece of your family. And, I know he had been talking to his mother, and his mother was beside herself, but it did give a lot of insight into it. You mentioned a couple of his quirks. His brother told us he drove with gloves on, and he loved to gamble. And it was it's almost like the student suicide thing, where you're trying to piece this thing together, but you'll never truly know why unless they leave something behind. But he had an interesting relationship with his brother. Their whole family seemed a little bit interesting to me. And he didn't really have a clear answer why. He hadn't talked to his brother a ton recently, and he seemed to maybe only know a whole bunch of surface details about him. But I probably went back to his house 3 days in a row until finally, he said, "I'm not talking anymore," and we respectfully went home and we're like, okay, I'm done.
He and his brother had, I think, bought and flipped a house in Vieira or something like that. There was a Space Coast connection, a Central Florida connection.
They had all these weird connections. He had a house in Orlando, and then, they had flipped a house in Vieira or something, and also his Stephen had lived in Vieira for a moment. We also sent reporters to speak to his old neighbors who, same thing, just thought that he was a nice guy. He kept to himself, never would have expected it. And there were all these weird kind of details that I think they're really still trying to figure out. His girlfriend had just flown out of the country, and they weren't sure if that meant that she was a part of it or that he was just trying to get her away from it so she wouldn't be a part of it. But the clues that they started to find afterwards, he recorded himself and recorded the hallway so he would know if people were coming, and he had staked out or researched different concert venues, and it seemed like he picked this one because he knew the lay of the land best. He spent a lot of time in Vegas, like you said, as a gambler, and he had rented this specific room a lot in the hotel, so he kind of knew how to carry
he could
it out.
rehearse the act in his mind almost,
Yeah.
knowing the view below where people would be.
Yeah, and it's still completely uncertain why. You know, did he just lose a whole bunch of money and that sent him over the edge? But the thing that I really think it goes back to when people ask why is mental illness.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that is hard to explain, and so it's not a satisfying answer to just say someone has mental illness, someone's struggling with depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder. You know, for me, it seems completely irrational to go and do what he just did. Who knows what was going on in his mind, and nothing justifies it, but they're not thinking rationally. They're not thinking like you and I, and it's so hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes who has a mental illness that you've never had to deal with. So I think that that's what it comes down to, and this is just my own opinion. You know, I think that it started a big talk about gun control and, you know, screening and different things like that. Since we're talking about education, I think it goes all the way back to education. You know, teaching people how to cope with different emotions, having to, you know, differentiate between anger and violence. But the thing is, that's a much harder solution than a reactive solution. You really have to get proactive. And sometimes, you know, we've seen a lot of these reports of very angry, violent, often men. And I wonder if better education sometimes could help to, you know, make a dent in this mental illness thing that we're seeing a lot.
Because there's sort of an unfettered nexus between people who have the mental illness and just amazing firepower that you can buy off the shelf just about these days. It's pretty scary. Another story that you worked on happened at Florida State University. Part of the education beat is higher education, and we had the tragic case of a pledge who died of alcohol poisoning at an off-campus party, I believe, and FSU President John Thrasher took the drastic, highly unusual step, it appears, of suspending all Greek life at FSU. What do we know about that?
Well, they still haven't lifted it, I believe. I think the ban is still in place. It's interesting, when I was assigned to work on this story, that happened when I was in college. I went to the University of Central Florida in Orlando, and it wasn't a death. It was a photo surfaced of like a whole bunch of pledges drinking, and the caption was something like, you know, pledges being forced to drink until they puke, and something really just awful. And President Hitt at UCF banned all Greek life. And I was never part of a fraternity or sorority, so I just kind of had this outside view. It didn't really affect my life at all, but I talked to people from UCF about whether or not they thought it was effective, to kind of figure out, would it be effective at FSU? And they said that they felt it sent a very strong message of, if you do something wrong, there will be consequences. You know, sometimes students of that age, they kind of feel invincible. And especially with extracurricular activities, and, you know, someone's not your parent. So they wanted to send a message of, if you do something wrong, you will be punished. And so they felt like now the students kind of know this is in their back pocket. If something like this happens again, well, you can't have your social anymore. You can't have your formal. But a big thing that they said is that you can't just have the punishment. You have to also have the education. You have to have those classes that teach about, you know, non-hazing and alcohol safety, and, you know, staying away from drugs, and, you know, respecting other people. You need to have those things. They implemented all these different programs, you know, pairing up new pledges with senior members, having pledge groups. They could, like, kind of have a little, you know, group of their own. So what I wound up writing was that it won't be enough to just ban Greek life altogether. You have to have the education piece of really changing the culture. And I think that's what Thrasher said, that he wanted a culture change. But I was a little confused about how he was going to go about it, because he said something like, you know, and it's up to the students to lead the charge. I think it's up to the university to lead the charge, and that will pull the students into it. You know, because at the end of the day, they're just students. and they're in college and they want to party and they want to have fun. So they kind of need a university that...
They need the grown-up. That's the...
Yeah. And you need, if you're going to change culture, sometimes it has to start at the top. And it needs to be a full campus experience, not just when you fix this, then you can, get back to your partying or something. Because then they're just, it's not going to change anything. So that was kind of the main message, that there needs to be more than just the ban.
I think John Thrasher is actually a pretty Greek-friendly president. At least he had been in the past. And by doing this, I think the latest headline was, this is indefinite until you come up with a solution. By putting the onus on, it was culture that got him into this mess, and too extravagant with the drinking and partying. Well, you're the ones that are going to have to drive the change.
Right.
You come to me with your solution. And
right.
maybe that's what will ultimately be the issue. All right, when we come back, it's election season for school board members and others. What are the biggest issues?
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring today's program. My guest in the studio today is Caroline Glenn from Florida Today. Caroline, it's election season for school board members, city council people, others, county commissioners. You cover the school district. What do you see some of the major issues for candidates going into this year?
I think the big one is going to be all about money. I think that with a lot of the issues with teacher raises, which with all of the projects the school district has taken on, with the EDR settlement, I think that the community maybe more than ever is really focused. They want to make sure that their school board members are being good stewards of their money. You have the teachers union obviously can sometimes play a big role in who gets elected if they back certain people. So I think that they're going to be listening for candidates who say that they really prioritize better teacher compensation. We saw a lot of that in the last election. I've seen that the teachers union isn't happy about some of them. With all of these projects, like I've said, it's been a mixed bag. Sometimes the community loves all the projects, they want them. Sometimes they think it's a waste of money. And then with the EDR settlement, obviously it's still a very open wound for some people that are upset about it. So I think that money management, how school board members are going to use taxpayer money, I think that's going to be a really big factor in who they get behind.
A couple of the issues that you hear from the public all the time that they want are safer schools, more school security, and they want you to protect their money, crack down on embezzlement. But two of the biggest controversies this year had to do with accelerating school security features and like armored cars as part of a centralizing of the accounts. How do you explain that? It's
weird where I just see it all the time on my stories. Sometimes people are thrilled about something, and then you're not going to please everyone. And then people just think it's the stupidest idea in the world. Yeah, the armored car. You guys had two bookkeepers embezzle like $278,000, and it went on for years. And so I think your chief financial officer, Penny Zerker, along with Dr. Blackburn, decided to really crack down on it. They brought all the accounts under the school district, under the same bank. I couldn't believe that some schools didn't have the same bank as everyone else. But a piece that has definitely been a hot topic is the armored car. An armored car that would come and pick up, field trip money, fundraiser money, things like that, and take it to the bank.
A completely common practice
a lot
among
of school
corporations
and a couple
with
school
centralized accounts,
yeah.
but it struck some people as weird.
Yeah, a couple school districts in Florida do also do it, the larger ones. I think the loudest voice that didn't like it was probably one of your school board members, Matt Susan. I think the quote he said to me was, "It makes no sense." He was uncertain about the thinking because I saw a lot of people commenting, if a bookkeeper is going to steal money, they're going to do it before they put it in the bag that goes in the armored car. So I see that point. But yeah, Ms. Zerker has talked about how this is a very common practice, and Dr. Blackburn has said that you wanted me to protect your money. I hired this CFO. She says this is how we do it. So that armored car piece, the contract itself has not been approved yet. So that will be something that we'll be watching to see. Will Mr. Susan, speak up again? He's been a little bit quiet about it recently. The money for centralizing accounts has been approved, but not the armored car specifically. So that'll be interesting to see if that gets by. And then, the security at the schools.
Let me ask you a couple questions about being a reporter.
Oh, okay.
What's the hardest thing about covering Brevard Public Schools for you? Or just doing your job day to day?
Well, one of the hardest things is there's just so much going on. A reporter these days, you really have to be a jack of all trades. I cover you guys. I cover charter schools, daycares, private schools, Eastern Florida State and Florida Tech, and then sometimes UCF and FSU when they misbehave. So there's just always so much going on, and these days reporters do their own videos, I take my own photos, you have to do your own social media. So I think that's something that's difficult.
It's a STEM job.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a significant amount of technological know-how to just being
there is. And
the
people
old,
come to,
cub reporter.
And people come to me because they think because I'm the youngest one in the office, I know how to use it all, but I don't. Another thing that's difficult, though, is you have to have a thick skin. You really do. One of the other things I did that was off my beat is I covered a lot of the election rallies during the presidential election, and I can say that I've been booed by 9,000 people. I also get, regarding my school projects, I get comments, oh, you're just doing that because Matt works at the school district now, or, how dare you not mention this, or why are you not working on this? And you have to take it all in, but you have to also have a really thick skin. Just like a teacher, a journalist is something that's not always very valued and not always very appreciated, and I'm sure it could always use some more work. And one big thing that's difficult for me is there's a lot of math in this, and journalists are not good at math. You've seen a lot of my stories. I like to write about money. I love to write about finances. Miss Zerker is one of the people I bug the most here. And I have to really make sure that I move that decimal just right. Otherwise, a story, BPS spent $1 billion versus $1 million. And that's another just little thing that's difficult about being a journalist.
I heard some teachers today talking about, they were lamenting that so many of them coach their kids not to go into teaching these days, which is too bad. What would you tell a high school student or your own child that was thinking about journalism as a career today?
I would absolutely encourage it. I never expected to make a ton of money being a journalist, and I would absolutely encourage it. I do talks at the schools. Sometimes I've been to Jackson Middle and a couple others, and I tell them to absolutely get into it. Even if it's not journalism per se, that wasn't what got me into it. It was writing, and I thought this would be the most lucrative way to make money.
It's a paycheck if you want to be a writer.
It's a paycheck if you want to be a writer, and you can't crank out books like Stephen King. But I would absolutely encourage it. I understand where they're coming from. It makes me so sad when people talk about they don't want to encourage other people to do what they do, and I understand where they're coming from. But the funny thing too is I think about becoming a teacher sometimes. Someone who reports on the struggles and the low morale and the low pay and the union fighting for this and that. I think about it. I think it depends what kind of person you are. What kind of vision do you have for your life? And yeah, I'd love to own a mansion and a private jet and stuff, but I also just know that I'm a person who has to be passionate about what I'm doing. If I'm gonna keep going and do it for years, I have to like it. And like I said, I can't do math, I can't do science, so being an engineer is really out of the question. But no, I would absolutely encourage people to become a journalist, but be smart about it, know the industry. I coached a lot of kids when I was in college, and they just had no idea that layoffs were happening, that cuts were happening. Just be smart about it. Really know the industry you're getting into, but I would absolutely encourage it.
Well, democracy needs reporters like you, Caroline
Dies
Glenn.
in darkness.
My thanks to Caroline Glenn for joining us in the studio here today. Also, my thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring today's show. We'll see you right here next week on Spectrum Channel 496, or look for us on YouTube, #BrevardWatch.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.